Hello, everyone. Welcome to this month's installment of Certifieds to Catch a Fraudster. Very excited to have Cheri Hipenbecker, who is General Counsel and a lot of other things for Knightberry, one of the largest title agencies now in the country. And we're going to have a really cool conversation over a variety of things. So, Cheri, thanks for joining, and I'll let you introduce you. You've got a vast history in the title space.
Now you just dated me and calling me vast history, Tom. Come on.
No, you did it in a compressed time frame, though.
That sounds good. Are we going to share our slide deck as we go through?
We will. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, we will.
So again, my name is Cheri. Thank you, Tom, very much for having me join you today. It really, truly is a pleasure and an honor to be partnered with Certified. And you've brought levels of service that we didn't have before. You brought us a main contact to be able to every day combat wire fraud, and when money is lost, to recover wire fraud. So we at Knightberry have gone all in with Certified, and we're really appreciative, and thank you for the opportunity. Myself, you'll find out very soon, I'm almost 51 years old. I've been in the title space for 16 years, just after my son was born. Live in Milwaukee area, Wisconsin. And when I joined Knightberry, we had 80 people, 8 officers or something like that. In the year 2022, we're up to 80 plus offices, almost 500 people. It's been a really fun and exciting time to be partnered with the owners of our company that have just seen the vision of bringing quality service to consumers. So thank you.
Who do you blame for getting you into title?
My son. So we had our first child, and we were having our second child, and I realized the day-to-day practice of the legal work of where you're counting every 6 minutes of your day was not where I wanted to go long-term. So I really thought I was going to join Knightberry and be here for like 5 years. When he got into kindergarten, he's now 16 years old driving. And yes, my insurance rates have gone up in my vehicle because he's driving, because it's been exciting. Every day it's something new. You don't know what your day is going to be, but the challenge is there. It's fast, it's invigorating, and it's connected. So
you're a licensed
yes, I fully blame Gavin. To the extent Gavin's watching, it's all on you, Gavin.
No, we all have to blame somebody, right? So you're a licensed attorney. Are you admitted into the Wisconsin bar? Any other bars? Okay, yes. Got it. And did you practice before you entered the title space or not?
Practiced about 6 years. We worked with Knightberry Title in Racine County, Racine, Wisconsin. When I was pregnant, I reached out to one of my good friends at Knightberry, Rachel Putrock, who you guys know well at Certified. And I said, I'm not certain if long-term this is the best decision for me. And then she introduced me to the folks to make it happen.
Yeah, I know. As an attorney. So for those of you, a little introduction on me, for those of you that are new to the webinar series, I'm Tom. I'm one of the co-founders of Certified, a recovering lawyer, similar to what Cheri is. Did the private practice thing for a long time. With my business partner, we actually started one of Michigan's largest title agencies, Sun Title. And I, like you'll hear Cheri's story, have experienced wire fraud firsthand. And it really cast us on this journey to say, how do we reimagine a safer environment where real estate transactions are essentially eliminated or significantly reduced from this threat at scale. So what we're going to talk about today, let me just share my screen to keep this thing on track here. We're going to go over a couple things. We're going to learn a little bit more about Knightberry, fascinating story about Knightberry and just their roots. And Cheri, we're going to just talk a little bit about the evolution of this issue of wire fraud or business email compromise, because, we'll explain it. It goes back, well over a decade now. And it's been this iterative process that we find ourselves facing more frequently today. How we think about solutions. We're going to talk about Payoff Protect, which is a new product recently launched in market for instant validation of mortgage payoffs. We're going to go through a recent payoff scam that was like $1.7 million just a couple of weeks ago, just to show that this is super active. And then we will just be talking about whatever comes to Cheri and I's mind. So if you want to direct those thoughts, please put them in the chat. So we mean this to be an open conversation. We would like to have engagement. You are not going to throw Cheri and I off. We talk all the time, and we do want to have this as impactful for everyone attending. So with that, Cheri, why don't you voice over just the history of Knightberry? It's very, very unique.
It's long. So Wisconsin as you know, is located on Lake Michigan, on the west side of Lake Michigan. You have the much nicer side over on the east side of Lake Michigan in Michigan. You do. Racine, Wisconsin is a lovely little harbor town that's located between Chicago and Milwaukee. So two major cities being Chicago and Milwaukee, a smaller harbor town is Racine. Knightberry actually started in Racine in 1854. It was a guy who was the Register of Deeds and started essentially a title company and started collecting all the documents as well. What's interesting about Knightberry Title is that in 1861, there was a fire. Just like in Chicago, there was a big fire around that same time period. Chicago Title started because of the big Chicago fire, where Chicago Title, everybody knows Chicago Title, they had the only records for the entire municipality in Cook County, Illinois. We had that, but just in a much smaller scale with Racine. Switch forward 100 plus years, Jeffrey B. Green, who is our owner today, purchased the company and was just located in Racine, expanded to a next harbor town over, Kenosha. And then from 1994 to today, after Craig Haskins, who is Jeff's son-in-law or stepson, joined, we said, why don't we grow? You know, this is a great opportunity. We have great people, we have great services. Let's move along. And so, like I said before, we went from a much smaller company where I joined at 80 people to almost 500 people in 5 different states. And going to wire fraud, because nobody really cares about this. They're here to talk about wire fraud certified and what they can do to implement to make their systems more safe. November 11th, 2011, that was my 40th birthday. And yes, November 11th, 2022 is coming up, so I'm almost 51. It's Veterans Day, which is a federal holiday. My 40th birthday, and it's our first cybercrime incident. It burns into my mind, this first cybercrime incident, because the day before, my husband and I had purchased our forever home. I came into work to get away from moving, and about 11 o'clock on November 11th, 2011, Jeffrey B. Green came into my office and said, we need to address something. And here's where we're going to walk into our history, our evolution, and our journey at Knightberry Title briefly, to kind of share our experience, because Tom, you and your company have been very, very vocal about your experience and how you've had to pivot and evolve and change and just try to stay ahead of the criminals. So we want to do the same thing and help out other folks by showing here's kind of what our experience is as well.
No, yes. And I appreciate the courage to do that. I do want to ask one more question about Knightberry. Okay, yeah. So 2 real estate agents are sitting in a bar. One of them is your client. One of them is not your client. What is your client saying to the non-client about Knightberry?
Responsive. I think what we have a culture of don't shirk away from anything that's wrong. We tackle in, we go all in. We've got a team of people, and we're going to be responsive, whether it's for our client or not. We don't really care. We want the transaction to work.
Love that.
Hopefully that's the response. Or it should be pull out your credit card. They need to start paying you as well, paying for your drinks as well. Sorry.
No, I asked that because you know the DNA of the company so well, right? And I appreciate that. And that was not you did not know that question was coming. So, yeah, so let's talk about this evolution. I'll do a little voiceover on our experience, and then we'll do a couple clicks deep into some of these areas that the fraudsters are really settling into. So from your perspective, Cheri, walk us through. I mean, you saw it 2011. We didn't see it in our title agency till 2015. But take us through the evolution as you've seen it from your lens.
So you see on the left-hand side of your screen, it says full title company, direct transfer of the title company escrow. This was the November 11th, 2011 Veterans Day, which was a Friday that year. I say that because the criminals very early on, the cyber criminals very early on, figured out that US banks don't operate on federal holidays. And if you can land a federal holiday towards a weekend, it's going to be very difficult to be able to recover funds if they've been diverted. So we have funds that get diverted on November 10th. The way they got diverted the funds is there was a compromise of our systems, malware deposited upon somebody's email. The criminals will be able to compromise our systems, able to access our bank account information directly and pull money directly out of our escrow account overseas. I want to focus on that. Went directly from our escrow account overseas to Russia. There was no intermediary in the United States. How did we respond to that? Well, first, we immediately dropped everything and tried to recover. That was difficult because it was a federal holiday. Banks are not open. So we're picking up the line, trying to reach out to the various different banks. The recipient bank was in Russia as well. We were not able to recover those funds. period, because it didn't exist. We engaged the FBI. We were actually located in the same building as the FBI. It went down and had pounded on the FBI's door, literally, got him engaged, but we weren't able to recover the funds because they were overseas. How did we address it though, going forward? This is the most important part. Number one, we actually had a block on international wires from our escrow account. The bank that had sent that money, the author allowed it to go on, had made a mistake. They had not implemented that particular block. So they participated in that loss. They also, the E&O carrier also participated in that loss. At the time, errors and omission insurance would cover this type of thing. Tom, would they cover this type of loss now?
No.
No is the answer. Even if you have cybercrime insurance, they're probably not going to cover it as well. So we got it minimized. We took care of it. And that was, we were responsive. Going back to that initial, what is night variable? We're responsive. We're going to make sure it happens okay. And then we started the mitigation process. This is what's interesting, why I said we really are appreciative to partner with Certified, because we didn't know what the mitigation process was because it was so new. So what do we do in that particular instance? Well, of course, we upped all of our firewalls. We upped all of our training to our staff. We made it so that not one person could initiate a wire, but two people needed to initiate a wire. We got fobs from these various banks. We make sure all of our escrow accounts had blocked on the international wires. So there's our step. Whew, we think we're done. Okay, you can't get into our escrow account. Now switch forward to 2014, 2015. You said your first experience was in 2015. Was that seller's proceeds?
So that was, we think it was a long con. So similar to the long cons that we'll get to that you and I were talking about before we went live here. So we were approached with a purchase agreement for a gas station on the southeast side of Grand Rapids, about 5 miles to my due south here. And we received a cashier's check for $185,000 and deposited that. And then it was a short due diligence window. And then we were asked to wire off that check. So essentially it was a bogus cashier's check kind of wire. They played the float. It was just interesting. Our lessons learned. One was, you know, the buyer's identity was compromised because it was a stolen identity originating out of the Bay Area in San Francisco. The same fraud had been running in about 5 different states almost simultaneously. And the seller, I think the seller was in it, but ultimately it originated out of Nigeria. It was a long, very sophisticated scam. Our lesson learned there is a cashier's check is no different than a personal check. And
it's not money, it's the potential of money. I always say
those babies have to season for a while in an escrow account, and not just a handful of days. I mean, they can take up to 10 days to clear off. And for those of you that are on the session today with table funding, immediate funding at close, there's always this just little float taking place, right? I take a cashier's check and I'm wiring out. Well, you're not wiring off that check because it hasn't fully settled. And that was one of those. I think the most interesting, so we were called by the Department of Justice 2 years later to testify in a pretty significant trial to disassemble this syndicate. The syndicate, all told, 35 convictions, $3 billion over a course of a 5-year investigation in cyber attempts, and one of the largest takedowns of the Nigerian Black Act. So we were deep
and
into
of course,
that.
all the people that were convicted were domestic, United States. Nobody, you can't, were you able to, did they work with the Nigerian folks? I mean, I don't know how cooperative that government would be.
Yeah, ish. I think that's the problem. I was called when my partner had a coin flip, and I guess I lost the coin flip. So I had to testify for the Department of Justice. I was involved in taking down the number 2 guy. There were two brothers in Canada, the Amati brothers, and they were running the Black Axe syndicate in North America. They were in Toronto. And what's interesting is, while the Canadians have this affection to us, when we go to extradite bad people that are sitting in their country, it's very hard to do so. So you end up with a lot of these criminals that are in Canada. So it was this grand jury subpoena, and the other problem I had was they were taking hits out on witnesses. So there was like this whole like safety issue with the people involved. So anyway, topic for another day. But it was.
I have not had to have the Secret Service protect me yet. That good for you for.
Yeah, no, it was FBI at that time, but yeah, full protective detail going down and back, and knock on wood, we were able to get a conviction. the testimony struck the federal judge in such a way that he added time to what was actually proposed by the Department of Justice. So that speaks wildly to just how bad these people are. And what was interesting is there were 8 victim witnesses. It was a 2-week trial. 2 of us were in the title settlement space. It was Sun Title out of Michigan. It was an escrow company out of California. The other 6 were online dating scam victims that had been scammed themselves, either out of, I think the lowest amount was like 130 and the highest was like 700,000. So yeah.
Those are heart-wrenching ones. We've seen a number of those as well, but
yeah.
anytime I see that somebody saying I'm communicating somebody via WhatsApp, I say, stop, you're communicating with a criminal. So more than
yeah. So it really was my drive back from the courthouse to the airport that galvanized this idea around Certified, because I asked the guy driving the vehicle, former Secret Service turned FBI investigator on the cyber side. I said, what keeps you up at night? And he said, well, it's social engineering. And I said, what do you mean by that? He said, we're just seeing how people can fall victim so easily to either giving up money or being recruited to be a money launderer or a money mule. And he's like, we don't see an end to that. Like there's just it's such a wide lens where they think they're working for a charity. They think we're working from home. They think they're helping a school district. I mean, it's really, and they've been, online dating is a huge one. And I think
the more that we can do what you're doing, just keep putting it out there and trying to get into the forefront of people's minds, the more it's going to be successful in stopping it. But the reality is, obviously, based on the Internet Crime Report that comes out every year, it's just ramping up. I mean, last year being 6.9 billion, the year before that was, I think, in the 5 billions. These are huge numbers. And thank you for putting your story out there. Shall I just continue?
No, you as well. But I mean, I think it bears a little more weight to say wire fraud is the way that they monetize how they're manipulating people in piggybacking off of a trusted relationship to get somebody to do something. I think I'm sending money to Cheri because she's helping with the closing, but it's not Cheri at all. It's somebody impersonating her. And that's how they monetize it. But the craft is in the social engineering. Yes, we'll talk about strategies of money muling and how they're using crypto, but the craft is in just the manipulation of human tendency and sympathy. And they just
and taking advantage, as we get into the fooling the buyers, is taking advantage of people that don't quite understand the system. I mean, new buyers coming to transaction know, I'm just going to a closing. They're worried about so many different things. They got to get the moving people in there. They got to get their inspection. I got to get my insurance. This moving the money, that's not at the forefront in a lot of ways, because you have your family. I got to get you in the school district. I got to get all my furniture. There's a lot of different things that new buyers are thinking about. And the money is that's something they just need to get done and get off their plate so they can go on to the next thing. Let me jump into our next evolution and journey at Nightberry so that you can kind of see where you were. You got to be involved in a federal criminal complaint, which is really interesting, by the way. And I think it would have been somewhat fun. We were not. But I'll tell you, our next fooling was in 2014, 2015, or something like that. And ours was the situation where we relied on an email from a seller, quote, seller, for their proceeds. So seller comes to the closing table, seller signs deed, seller gets check, seller leaves closing table. We receive an email from seller that says, oops, I can't deposit that check. I need to be able to have my funds wired. We did that. Okay, we made a mistake. No worries, we overcame it. We sent the wire to the wrong people. We made sure that the real seller got their money. More importantly for us was, how do we respond to that? How do we move forward? We do training on this. We implement a wire transfer department. We have steps and processes that we implement. We don't ever rely upon email. We never wire funds to a seller after we've given them a check at that closing table. All of those steps we have to implement because we have to pivot. We need to acknowledge what's going on, where's the social engineering, and being able to be reactive. And in that particular case, we also got E&O coverage on that particular one for recovery. Would that be available today?
No.
Not so much. So I'm going to focus on that because a lot of people go, well, there's insurance for all this stuff. There isn't today. There may have been, 3 years ago, not today in 2022. So we've addressed both those two major issues. Unfortunately, we had 2 losses. We recovered those losses. We pivoted. We moved forward. We were flexible. We didn't have teams of people. The recovery services were really difficult. I remember picking up the phone, calling to banks and the wire, going, you need to stop this wire. You can't move this. And they would be like, oh, we don't know who you are. Do you have authorization from the account holder? I'm like, the account holder is a criminal. They're
Exactly.
FBI on the phone with me. And the FBI would say, you need to stop this. And they still would not. These banks would not. Again, this was back in the day. This is 2015. This is 2011. A little bit of a story here, and especially because we have the recovery services from Certified. We haven't had to use it because Nigeria has made mistakes. We had to use recovery services for the next thing, where buyers have been fooled. And actually, we had recently a private lender that was fooled. The recovery services from Certified have been awesome, because I don't need to call the FBI. I don't need to beg the people in the wire transfer department, the receipts, say, please put a block on these accounts, because you have a team of people that do that. So let's talk. So that's steps 1 and 2. Now we're in the fool buyers over on your right-hand side. I said 2015 forward, and this one is 2015 forward, and I don't see an end to this other than us continuing to do what we do and trying to educate buyers, educate lenders that are trying to send us money, any title company, escrow company money, legitimately, on please stop. Please don't rely on emails. Please have conversations. Please do independent verification of wire transfer instructions. Tom, you stopped the slide deck, so I suspect you want to jump in and chat.
Well, I think this is worth underscoring and slowing down a little bit, because you hit 3 very important points, right? You hit the direct transfer out of an escrow account, you hit seller net, and then you also hit the incoming funds. What we're seeing is everything is at risk. And to your point, I want to backfill a few things. When we say that there's no insurance, you may have a social engineering, you may have a wire fraud transfer endorsement, you may have something, but that's the heading, that's the bold print. Like we say in law, the bold print giveth and the fine print taketh all of that away. And the conditions precedent, or what's required to claim access to what will be a maximum of $250,000 if you're able to get it, the 5 or 6 or 10 things that they require, had you done those and had you properly documented that, you wouldn't have had the incident. So I think that's what's unfortunate. And again, the reason why is that London and Singapore and these big insurance markets cannot underwrite human behavior at that level. We can say, hey, there's a register of deeds. We know that there could be a gap. We could miss a mortgage, blah, blah, blah. On average, it's whatever. But how can they underwrite a buyer receiving a FedEx overnight, or an email that looks like it's coming from my company, Cheri's company, whoever, and falling victim? Like, they can't insure it. There's nothing to underwrite there, right? That's the challenge.
To be fair, they're also saying you need to take ownership of your own money and how things happen. And they're saying, follow these guidelines and you should be good. And it's only if something within those guidelines is followed and something still new is happening, then we'll insure you. I don't think it's unfair. And what it does is it drives companies like us and industries like us to make smart decisions when handling money. And again, the insurance companies didn't have those directions in 2011, 2015, and they do have those directions now. So it's to the extent that you're listening to this and thinking, I have insurance, don't worry about insurance. Do what Tom said, look at your exclusions, look at the conditions precedent that said, did you meet these? And if you haven't implemented those processes in your company, stop everything, implement those processes in your company now.
And one other thing I want to mention is the transaction process, especially for first-time home buyers, it's very opaque, right? I mean, they have very tight, look at the purchase agreement and take a step back and say, okay, I'm a first-time home buyer. It's incredibly competitive still, even though we're adjusting a little bit to the buyer-seller leverage point, but there's still no inventory out there. And the first 10 to 12 days codified in the purchase agreement are everything from inspections to appraisal to all the conditions from the lender. I mean, it's just a deluge. So to receive a request about money and money having to go in, guys, we've seen emails where the fraudsters make up some fake law and say, based on this, like, click here and you'll see that we have to get the money in, 30 days before closing, or it's a violation of statute, whatever. I mean, they're very, very.
I've seen situations where buyers have been fooled because the fraudster said somebody's email was compromised, and it wasn't Nightberry or anything, but somebody's email was compromised early on the transaction. The fraudster says to the buyer, Buyer says, well, how much money should I send you, fraudster? And the fraudster says, I don't know, look at your contract. And the buyer's like, well, what about my lender? Oh, well, we still need all of your money, and then we'll be able to figure out the money later on. And the person said, okay, here it is, and sent all that money. I mean, they had the money, so that's interesting, but they stole that money too.
Yep. All right. Back to the script. Fooling buyers. What are you seeing?
So the same thing that we have. All of this starts with somebody's email is compromised. By the way, another thing, if in your industry, your organization, or all your partner organizations, you haven't started talking about multi-factor authentication on email, the first, best, cheapest thing that we can do, go talk about multi-factor authentication. Just this week, I was in front of 35 plus realtors talking about something else, and I always end every presentation on multi-factor authentication, and I would say at least half of them didn't have that. It was outside of our normal region. Very scary. So same thing. Email is compromised. Same mitigation that we talked about before. Don't rely on emails, phone calls, talk about certified. And then I would ask the question, do I really need a wire in for buyer's proceeds or buyer's cash to close? Maybe you don't. Maybe a certified check is fine because the seller doesn't need their money right away and they'll take a certified check from closing. But if you do need to have seller's funds wired out, as you indicated, we can't take in a certified check and then wire off that. That's actually using somebody else's money. Then you need to do some sort of protocol. This is where Nightberry partnering with Certified about a year ago now has been critical and very, very helpful. If somebody said early on in the transaction, we communicate with buyers based on information that were provided by the realtors. Hopefully it's the right information provided by the contact information. And we send our wire transfer instructions in your secure portal to the buyer. We've had a conversation with the buyer, either left a voicemail message or actually spoken with them, sent them an email introducing Certified, and then send the wire transfer instructions via the Certified process that you have. It's integrated with our escrow production software. It's great. It forces and drives the conversation. And it also, in at least one instance, has identified when we had incorrect buyer contact information because the criminals had already compromised somebody's email, created a new buyer contact information. We had sent the information through Certified for our wire transfer instructions, and we were able to identify that the buyer that we were communicating with, was based on the western coast of Africa. And we paused right there, identified it very well. So it's interesting. We've been able to, by doing this, by partnering with you folks, we've been able to identify things much earlier on in the transaction than we would have. And we have a consistent process that our staff can be comfortable in employing.
So what Cheri's implementing is essentially the roadmap to success for consumers. And there's not a silver bullet to protect every single consumer from wire fraud. It does not exist. What you can do is to say, hey, there are things that we're going to do to meet our standard of care. We have to assume that the real estate agent doesn't identify with this risk because they may not be touching either a small amount or the large blocks of money, the cash to close. Maybe they're taking EMD and they're netting commission against it. Some brokers do, some brokers don't, right? But they identify with our industry to say, look, you're the hub of the wheel. You're the inflow and the outflow of all of the closing funds. So what Cheri said, and she said it quickly, but it's very important, we educate the consumer. We let them know, we grab them by the face mask and say, look, we're happy to be working with you, but there's a threat out there and the threat approaches you uniquely. And we won't know when that knock comes on the door, right? Anybody would not know because we're being spoofed or the real estate agent's being spoofed. But your life savings could be gone in a single instant if you're solicited to transfer funds and it's not coming from us. Okay, so what does success look like? And Cheri does this as well early in the transaction. This is what to watch out for. Here's what not to do. And then you send the wiring instructions securely to them early in the transaction. We do the same on our title side. At the time of commitment delivery, every single customer, I don't care if they're commercial, construction, resi, they get the wiring instructions with the proper notice and the education. You also call them and at least leave a message so you have another point of contact. And what that does is it just, again, in this just crazy environment, we don't know where they're in, right? They could be dealing with an inspection issue, rates just went up, they're losing their lock. We need to say, hey, this one's important. We've been involved in recoveries where the seller hasn't even signed the contract and the buyer wires funds for a cash closing. Title wasn't even involved yet because the closing attorney representing the buyer was compromised. They made up some excuse. They didn't even have a fully binding agreement, and the money was gone. So this is
And
not
in an
a,
environment where you're going to lose the house, and the criminals could have taken advantage of it, especially in, spring of 2022. If you don't deposit this money, I don't trust you. I'm not going to accept your contract. So you got to deposit that money now, something like
Yeah.
that.
So then at 9 o'clock this morning, I was mentioning this to Cheri. I'm on the phone with another title company in Michigan who will remain nameless. And I've got a friend that's funding a $600,000 cash deal. And he does not want to wire the funds because he happens to be our accountant for all our businesses. And I'm talking to the head of escrow, and she's saying, I don't know why this is a problem. Like, we send our wiring instructions through secure email, and we've never had a problem. And I said, well, how
Your
do
email
you?
is lovely if the email has not been compromised by the recipient.
And that's what I said. I said, what if the email's compromised? Well, they have to set up a password. I said, but you're not sending them a code that enables them to do that, like through text message or a phone. It's just a link and you create a password. I said, and then even if they did that, how do you know the buyer's doing that? And to Cheri's point, the system CertifID has identified this is the value of this. Was like 3 weeks ago, there was a woman that was closing on a property just under $700,000. She was receiving wiring instructions. Her account was compromised, and we picked up signals in Nigeria. Not only was she compromised, the fraudster would have received those instructions, and she was sitting on fake instructions.
Of course.
So it's like everybody deploys and says, whoa, 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 have you received instructions that look like, and sure enough, like you just smoked that whole thing out. So I don't want to belabor this, but we are not responsible for driving them to the bank. We're not responsible for a buyer being over their shoulder when they open up online banking and make the request. We're responsible for educating, engaging, securely transferring, and keeping them guided along the process. The other thing CertifID does is, even if you send the wiring instructions, let's say on day 5 at commitment delivery, or day 1, wherever you choose, it seeds in reminders to them. Hey, remember, you're not going to get them by carrier pigeon or overnight or a text message or whatever it happens to be. It was about 4 or 5 weeks ago now, just here in Grand Rapids. I get a phone call from a broker. Hey, first-time home buyer shows up, $94,000. He had saved 2.5 years. He's a trades worker, and the money's gone. And he learns about it at closing. And it's just not, it's not a world where we want to find ourselves. There are bad closings because maybe we missed a proration or a commission, and then there's that. Right?
Money recovering overseas is very difficult, if not impossible. The answer is impossible. In the Q&A, there was one question, and I just want to quickly address this, Tom.
Let's do it.
The question says, what do you mean by when you were saying, quote, we were receiving signals from Nigeria, end quote?
Yeah.
On that point is, I don't know if people have watched some of your videos that shows that when somebody is collecting or receiving the wire transfer instructions from the title company, they get a text and an email. They have to log in through the CertifID website to be able to receive various wire transfer instructions. And they have to answer some series of questions to be able to legitimize who they are. And then you have some sort of geolocation program, correct me if I'm wrong, Tom, where you can identify whoever's completing that, where they're located. And Nigeria, unfortunately, is one of those countries where that raises a red flag that maybe you want to put a pause on it. Is that a fair statement?
No, absolutely. We essentially have the programming, we actually patented this, where before wiring instructions are sent to, let's say a buyer, because we don't know that yet, we got to go through our proofing, the system does. We analyze, 100 to 300 markers off of a device. So we're looking at the connection, where the device is located, if there's a proxy, if the device has been seen over other trusted sites. I mean, I could go on, but it's a very, very robust scan that takes about a half a second in the background to run. And I'd say 9 out of 10 times when we see that we're dealing with a fraudster, it's coming from our digital analysis. So we have a confidence score. And in both situations that you talked about and I talked about, our system identified the fact that something is off, something is wrong, either because the device is in the US, we look at clocks, settings on devices, we look at, there's a bunch of different things, but that's what I mean when we pick up signals. We're picking up hundreds and ingesting hundreds of signals in milliseconds to say, hey, is this Cheri in Wisconsin, or is there somebody impersonating or maybe have taken over this account? We pierce through that account and say who's actually hitting the key and where are they? So
And that
great
isn't to
question.
say that folks located outside the United States couldn't wire transfer in funds for purchase in the United States. I mean, we've had a number of people that are located in European countries or located in the East, and we need to send our wire transfer instructions. And you guys have pegged off and said, wait a second, they're in whatever country, is that okay? And we anticipate that. We say, yes, these are the people that we intend. So it's actually just another step and a pause, because pause is the most important thing in all of this. It's people acting too fast and being socially engineered. So that was our first thing. So now educate for buyer incoming funds. Our education is most important. Our partnership with CertifID is. I think the next thing we really wanted to talk about is the payoff protect and the next evolution of how CertifID has made our process a little bit easier here at Knightberry.
So we're talking about mortgage payoff fraud. So for those of you that have not seen this, and hopefully you never will, but chances are you likely will, is where the fraudster is tampering with a mortgage payoff, sending it to the title company, either directly from, the quote unquote mortgage lender, could be coming from the seller who has a mortgage or the buyer if it's a refinance, or it could be coming from the closing attorney or the other title company if you're in bifurcated or split markets. However it is, they're taking typically an original payoff that they have their hands on. So there's always an email compromise or some node of information exchange that they've compromised. They're doctoring that up and they're sending that in saying, here's an update. A payment was made. The good through date expired, whatever it happens to be.
So the same compromised email is the beginning. So again, I'm going to reiterate because it's worth reiterating it for all your industry partners. Please talk about multi-factor authentication on email. If you only have a password to access your cloud-based email, guess what? The criminals are going to get you. I mean, if you get multi-factor authentication was just a silly little code that gets texted to your phone as additional step, additional lock to get onto an email. It's free. It's free. And if you have a service that doesn't provide it for free, get off of that service and get you a different email. Yeah. I digress. So what was interesting about mortgage payoff wire fraud is it's the same thing where we're sending money. The title company is sending out funds to pay off a mortgage, similar to what we do when we send sellers proceeds. And we talked about this earlier. We said we implemented a step where we had a wire transfer department. We had 2 people to initiate any wire. We actually spoke with the seller. We verified wire transfer instructions. However, in a mortgage payoff, it's a lot different. Tom, have you ever had to call, let's say you're calling a residential mortgage lender. I'm just going to use Chase because they do a lot of things. Have you ever tried to call to verify their wire transfer instructions, Tom?
I have.
And how long does that take?
That's a box of chocolates because especially in 2021, they all went to originate loans or process. And now, because they don't want to be paid off. Like that's an inconvenience for them. You can't have a prepayment penalty on a residential deal, right? So, it's interesting. We ran studies against this and, on average in a blender, you're north of 20 minutes. By the time you pick it up, you verify the number, you get somebody on the phone rather quickly, blah, blah, blah. We've had instances though, where it's been hours, like yes. You literally you're just listening to the whole music for hours.
Or you finally get to talk to somebody and say, well, do you have authorization? Right. I do, but it's to Knightberry, not to me individually. Oh, well,
no, I know. Yep. So we don't have that file. Could you fax an 800 number and then we're sure to sort that out a second.
And the banks are doing what's right. I mean, they cannot disclose non-public information without proper authorization, but that does create a delay. I mean, think about when we're doing however many closings a week and we have to pick up the phone, and it's 20 minutes, if not really closer to 3 hours on average, to be able to get through that and the irritation because you're trying to get through the prompting system. So we were really happy this summer. Actually, we worked with CertifID to help you work through this product, implement it. We are beta testing, and this is an easier way for our staff to be able to verify wire transfer instructions for a mortgage payoff. Here's an example of one where you guys said, this is a good wire transfer instructions. It was to JP Morgan Chase. It had an account number and a routing number. And we plug into your system all of this information. It takes us 20 seconds to be able to do that. And very quickly, you'll respond and say it's valid, if it is in fact valid, because you have a database that you have verified and insured against that says these are all good wire transfer instructions for mortgage payoffs. Yeah, and our staff loves it because it's from 20 minutes to 2 hours down to 30 seconds.
And not only is it good, but if you rely upon that, Knight Berry is directly insured up to $1 million if they rely. So we took it a step further, and it was an arduous process, but London finally saw it our way to say, look, this is something that you can insure. And yeah, we not only have a data set, but we built in the AI and the ML machine learning around the ways that which people express these mortgage payoffs. Like JP Morgan, when we started to assemble this, I mean, there'd be 150 ways that JP Morgan shows up. Chase Bank NA, JP Morgan NA, J.P.N. So I can go on and on, but you're exactly right. So to backfill what Cheri just mentioned, we created Payoff Protect as a way to provide an instant decisioning engine that if you put in mortgage payoff information, you will get a decision instantaneously that you can rely upon. So those instances also, Cheri, we also are the leading intelligence source for the Secret Service on wire fraud. We have a bad list as well, and we push it against that. And you've had situations where you put in information, all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute, this is a known fraudulent account, time to hit the brakes hard.
And what's interesting about this, Tom, is people said, couldn't you build your own database of valid payoff instructions? Reality is we could, but we have how many offices and how many people and how many variations, and to be able to partner with somebody who's done that and with the insurance, frankly, I said my first gray hair was November 11th, 2011, my 40th birthday when we had that compromise, and it's continued to gray, but I do color it a little bit, by the way, so there you go. This has made me sleep and have less gray hairs. And all of our staff likes it because you feel confident in wiring those out. Here's an example on that same one I just showed you where Certified said thumbs up. Here's where we had a updated wire transfer instructions. Somebody's email had been compromised. We popped this into Certified Mortgage Payoff Protect. You'll see the only difference was the account number. The routing number is the same. The JP Morgan Chase, everything was the same on this. I think it was 4 or 5 pages of the payoff instructions. And guess what? There was a problem. So you guys put verification pending, red flag, our staff stops. You have a very good system where one of your team members typically will reach out and say, okay, let me get more information about this to see if it is, maybe it's just not in our system yet, or maybe it is a compromise. This in fact was a compromise situation.
Yeah, so what, a little more texture on that. We have a team that all they do each and every day is verify account and routing information that we don't see in our database. And our database has an instant response right now, about 85%, overall coverage ratio in the high 90s. But in situations where, look, banks will continue to change with the consolidation that we're going to see because of the recession that I already think we're in, we're going to see servicers. And I mean, there's going to be account changing a lot, right, on the mortgage servicing space. That's not a bad thing. It's just making sure that we have right from fraudulent. So we will go out. Last Friday is a perfect example. We saw 2 new records. We went out and they were fraudsters, 100% fraud, hard stop, over $1 million on Friday alone, just on 2 payoffs.
So you saved that product, and all the person at the title company had to do was pop it in, and your team took over. And your team has taken over. The vast majority have been legitimate and simply as you're building your database. But our commercial department says you really built this as a residential, but you've expanded it for commercial, because there's not as many payoffs that you're working on. And I want to shout out to you guys because we came to you after you implemented this. First, you created a solution, and then we came to you and said, we love it for residential. Commercial team is having a little bit more difficulty. And you said, we're going to be on it and we're going to be responsive. It's typically been 24 hours after a verification pending that you've been able to verify, come back green, and our people are be able to wire it out, feeling confident that they're the right wiring to the right department. We have other steps that we take as well, but it's really incredible what your team has been able to accomplish.
No, I appreciate that. We wanted to offload from you the need to do the verification callback. One, we've got a system and a protocol set up with Lloyd's where we can ensure that whole protocol, even though there's digital and there's manual involved in that. But I'll just give a high five to our team. They do an incredible job of just making sure that we follow those steps down to a T. But even in our staff and our title company, we just don't have to call back to verify anymore. And that's been nice. We can do other high impact items.
And the reality is you're using your closer time so much better. And your closers are so happy not to have to waste the time on the phone because they want to be talking to customers, talking to buyers, sellers, realtors, lenders, et cetera. So it's a win-win proposition. Here, I mean, you showed me that this morning, and maybe you could walk through, because did money get lost?
Yeah, no, 1.7 landed in a fraudster's account. No, this was one of the more recent ones we've had. This was a $1.7 million. This was the house down in the Austin area in Texas. The payoff was about a little over 1.7. This just happened, 3, 4, 5 weeks ago, right to the day almost. So what's interesting about this is I had to mask some things for privacy, but people talk about, well, what about name matching? If we just did name matching, all this stuff would be absolved, blah, blah, blah.
It would help.
At the top of this payoff statement, which was the payoff statement, it said Acme Servicing, right? Look at the account name. They went to the same bank, created Acme Management LLC with an account number. So again, how
$1.7 million. So these criminals really went all in on this one.
Why not?
Usually
right?
They're not going to, but 1.7 million, they're going all in.
Exactly. So again, I use this to say not only is it very recent, but it was one of those where, this is now a customer on Payoff Protect. So we got that going for us, but we were able to get a nearly full recovery on this just because of the timing perspective. But this is one where, yeah, they went to the links that even if there was any type of, the banks make a choice. The Federal Reserve has no name matching. Some banks, community banks, smaller institutions, may have a little bit of eyesight in certain layers relative to transfers, and they may raise their hand saying, hey, this doesn't quite match, or are you sure of this and that? But they're not obligated to. It's not in the deposit agreement. It's not in the escrow agreement. And this is one that I highlight because, one, it's a massive number, but secondly, they went to links to obfuscate, right, that something else was going on with the creation of the management. And then the other thing that we're seeing is just how quickly they're moving the money. So in the center here, you have victim. Victim could be us on the title side. Victim could be a consumer buyer. It could be a split title company doing a direction of funds request over to you for closing, or vice versa. You could be scammed on a direction of funds. It doesn't matter, guys. It's every single vector. It could be commissions. Commissions are high enough now that it's a great payday for them, right? On average, you have $400,000, sale price, and plenty of money in commission. So victim sends money, is fished by the fraudster, is impersonated. It always goes, from what we've seen, from a domestic account, the victim's account, to something domestic here, whether it's a money mule that understands what they're doing or a money mule that has no idea what they're doing. There's an account open. They're not giving bad account information. Mm-hmm. That's the other thing. They're always a good account. Mm-hmm. From there, we're seeing a transfer to crypto, then a crypto tumbler, which further anonymizes the crypto wallet. So essentially it takes cryptocurrency, which is anonymized at one level, and then they blend all of these wallets together. And then on the back end, so you can't see it. It's like you put ingredients in a blender and it's like, okay, what is that exactly? And then they move it into an overseas crypto wallet out of the tumbler, then into essentially a bank in their local, a lot of times it'll go to Nigeria, then a Nigerian bank, and then it could be sent out into different fiat currency in different denominations. So cryptocurrency is a huge problem. While you can trace in some ways the initial transfer, the crypto tumbler is a huge issue, and it's new technology that's hitting. We have yet to recover and been involved in a recovery where they actually got cryptocurrency back. So as much as federal law enforcement says we have eyes on and we can do that, we're yet to see any funds come back from an actual crypto wallet.
Tom, so, can you go back to that for just a moment?
Yep.
It's very funny, in 2011, when this starts, people say, okay, provided that the money stays domestic, it's, and you're not sending it directly overseas like we had our 2011. If you can get a hold of the right folks within about 48 hours, you might have a chance to be able to recover. It used to be 72 hours, actually. Where are you now on that? Because you outlined this, and that's the first time I heard of crypto tumbler. I don't have Bitcoin or anything like that. How long does it take typically once it lands in the domestic account to start moving around?
Yeah, so think about it in hours of Federal Reserve time. That's how I like to think about it. So you're right. It used to be publicized that the kill chain was a 72 or 96 hour cycle. It's a today or tomorrow thing. So if you're bleeding through the second day or even a day and a half of Federal Reserve time, remember, they don't need the Federal Reserve to move money from an account to a crypto wallet. They don't need the Federal Reserve open on a Saturday to pull cashier's checks or pull out cash or buy gift cards or Amazon. I mean, you can't imagine anything that they can convert as quickly as they can, an amount in a bank account to some other form of value, right? We've seen people buying deposits on multiple cars or commodities, or that's why they like the federal holidays, because it gives them one more day where they can just spend time getting that money out without being detected. But it's a today or tomorrow thing. We've had instances where I'll just give you the last 30 days. We had a mortgage payoff and it was just under $200,000. It was 3 weeks old and almost all the money was there. You couldn't even just like, wow, okay, that's shocking. Some money mule wasn't doing their job. We have another one where same day they were hit in the morning and somebody jumped on it, was fully run out to crypto by 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So it just, you don't know. And I think on mortgage payoff fraud, the challenge there specifically is that the tail of notice is longer than any other notification, because normally they don't know about it until the seller or the mortgage holder receives a late payment notice 30 to 45 days later that says, hey, you missed your payment. Oops.
And the reality is, so yeah, a seller knows right away if they didn't receive their money in their account. They know that right away. But to your point, the mortgage payoff, the seller who thinks their mortgage was paid off by their title company could probably look and go, oh, I got this late payoff. It's been 30 days. Things probably got mixed in the mail. So you probably are even talking 60 days after the closing before anybody identifies that that money was sent to the wrong party. The 1.7 million, I imagine somebody got heart was palpitating a little bit and called you and they figured it out that a little bit early. Gratefully you were able to recover. But I would say the vast majority of them, it's many weeks, if not months down the road before they even have an inkling that money was sent the wrong location.
Yeah, I mean, the largest recovery to date we were involved in, Secret Service published this internationally, was $21.5 million last October on a commercial refinance of an apartment complex. The money went from the title company doing the refinance to an elementary teacher's checking account outside of Indianapolis. And she was in an online dating scam. She thought she were helping her boyfriend settle. He was having a problem opening an account. She was instructed she got it on a Friday. She was instructed to convert it to cryptocurrency over the weekend, but she was mad at her boyfriend for some reason. So she held up those transfers.
So cyber criminals, be nice throughout the entire process till you have the money. I mean, that's fabulous.
Hell have no fury, right? So she had the fury. We get a notice on 11 on Monday because they had called because it was a sizable wire. We do the same thing. We engaged, funds frozen Monday afternoon, full transfer back by Thursday. But that was just because there was other things going on, right? So anyway, let's, what else do we have here? This is great shit. What else do we have?
I don't know, we're 53 minutes in and I don't know how many people are still around. But
all right, yeah, no, if you guys have any questions, please put them in the chat. There's a survey at the end, but just a little bit, I mean, I want to thank you, Cheri. Nightberry has been an early adopter of Certified. And for me, what I've appreciated is that's because you have the culture. It wasn't about the technology, the cost, the impact. You guys are winning in market over this. I hear about that. But it really was a culture where, again, I asked the Barstool conversation, you're just responsive, like you're going to pivot and you're going to continue to evolve and adapt. And I think you represent, like many of us on the call, that, hey, we're here for the long term, right? If we wanted to exit, we could have exited in the last 24 months. Everybody did. But I have appreciated that. And I have appreciated your willingness to come alongside and say, hey, we have a new product. We have a new solution. We want to think about piloting some of these things with you. So I think it goes beyond just us, but it's a compliment to your team and so many others on the call that are customers of ours that says more needs to be done. And we're gonna carry that water because ultimately it's not only the right thing to do, but we have a responsibility to do it.
Well, and yeah, our team has gone all in. And I want to say I'm grateful to be representing the team, but it's truly a team. I mean, from everybody in this company, we want to keep consumer information and consumer money safe, and to be able to partner with a company like yours that can help us with the education component, with the verification component, with the recovery when we've had the recovery situations. It's been amazing. The recovery has been helpful. And so what I wanted to do is I independently reached out to our staff members and I said, on an anonymous basis, you could pop into a Google Doc. I said, please just tell me a couple words about Certified because I have this thing coming up. And I didn't know what to expect. And we have the next 4 slides that I want to focus on because, you know, this is a marketing piece for Certified because your product works and you're not going to stop where you are now. We all know that, you know, 2011 is when we started and things change. They're going to continue to change. Why? Because $6.9 billion went overseas last year, according to the FBI. And frankly, it's probably more than that. That's probably just what was reported.
Agreed.
So some of the feedback, this is the feedback came, first of all, why Certified? You're keeping our company leading in the industry. We're going forward. We're partnering with the right team. We have the extra layer of security. Customers are like, okay, thankfully, I'm working with a company that understands that risk and is in advance, and it's comforting for all the parties. So people feel better about this because, you know, it's getting out there. Wire fraud is an issue, and some buyers and sellers and lenders are saying, how can I help? How can we do this? And we're saying, this is what we certified with or worked with. And what's working? Let's kind of walk through a couple things here. We get accurate and complete information. That's always interesting because sometimes you would have people in other situations that transpose a number, or they're not quite certain what their wire transfer instructions, or wait a second, I have an LLC, but I'm not certain if I have an LLC bank account or a trust. All of those type of things, you're able to synthesize and put in one seamless product. Whereas before we were kind of piecemealing these items. The payoff instructions is great. Our team has gone all in. As soon as we were able to introduce the Mortgage Payoff Protect, they said, this is the best product we've had. This saves us time and makes us sleep, and it gives us a green. We love green. Everybody loves green. So thank you for giving it a green. And it's a sales tool extraordinaire. I mean, our salespeople, we're going to use this to put ourselves in the market to make ourselves unique. That isn't to say we don't want other title companies to come and use your product. In fact, we do, because we want all the transactions to be safe. We tried out different products. This is where we landed, and this is where we're staying. So that's what's working. Couple things that need work, and this is where I'm hoping you, Tom, are going to come out and tell us, don't worry, Cheri, we got this coming. And this was from our staff anonymously. So I want to be clear. So collecting information is great. So when we say seller, send us our information. Sending information can be a little bit difficult, more difficult for the buyers, because they do have to, they get an email, and then from Certified, they get an email from us, they get a call, they have to log in, they have to pass some knowledge-based authentication questions. And sometimes people have difficulty with knowledge-based authentication questions. It's getting easier as the years progress. People understand that I had to submit to the IRS, I had to submit my return last year. I had to go through a KBAs, but that doesn't mean everybody does it. So it's going to get easier, but it takes a little bit of time. And the next question was, it was more challenging for the buyers again. They there's a little bit of a pause from that buyer. Why am I filling this out so I can get your wire transfer instruction? You'll work on it. You'll get there. And really the last one is the most important part. We'd like to be able to show buyers up front, to have a lovely little demo that says, this is what your experience is going to be, and this is why. I think you're probably going to tell me, Cheri, that's in the works and that's coming. Are you, Tom?
Because we do that here at Sun, I'm going to be sending you a PDF that walks through line by line and fully annotated. So what's interesting in this, and I appreciate the candor here, is we have intentionally read our real estate and lender partners into the use of Certified, because we need that conversation to start at agency formation, or when the loan application goes in, or the pre-qual letter, whatever it happens to be. Because then when it is triggered and they receive it, like, oh, I don't know exactly what they're saying, but I remember something about this, right? And that's enough, because if we don't have their engagement, then we don't have the security wrapper that we need around, hey, I know it was Cheri, I know she received the instructions, she went through the full flow, and she's in a position for success right now. And that's what I can point to as a title provider for buyers or sellers or whoever it happens to be. But we take all these things to heart along. We are a customer-led, from a product standpoint, all feedback. I mean, that's the strategic roadmap. So I can solve and will solve for your third bullet point right after this call.
There's going to be a demo too. There'll be like a video, like a 2-minute video that shows you, hey,
All right, that might take a minute, so I'll take that back.
that's okay. I'll give you till the end of October. It's fine. Tom.
Okay, got it. You're awesome.
And then what else should folks know? Look, no bounce seller proceeds checks. Yeah, or they actually, if we can wire funds out, by the way, I love wire from that standpoint that we don't have stale checks sitting in our system. I like that, but checks are fine too. Peace of mind for realtors. We've started to get engagement and buy-in from our realtor customers and friends as well. We've started a new process where we say, realtors, you haven't always given us the buyer seller contact information upfront in transactions. We've worked with them to say, please do that. And the reason we're not doing is not we're trying to take over the transaction. We're just trying to keep everybody safe. We worked with our Wisconsin Realtors Association and actually have a publication that came out very recently that says, please talk to your title companies, understand that that's what they're trying to do. So it is a whole industry sea change on what we're doing. The immediate access to Secret Service. I mean, that's what you should know. Look, when I had to pick up the phone and try to call the banks and say, please stop that wire that was sent to this criminal's account and this is fraud, and they wouldn't talk to you and it would be hours and your hair would get grayer. The fact that we can just talk to our friends at CertifID who have their friends with Secret Service who go directly into those accounts, those banks and say, stop. I mean, a couple of weeks ago, we had a lender that wired out $225,000 that was fooled because they didn't have the protocol, unfortunately. We call CertifID. We found out about it at 3:15, gathered the information, got approval, called CertifID at 3:45, and by 4:15, you guys had that money locked down, $225,000. And to your point, had we waited overnight, probably would have been gone.
Right.
Been converted to a cryptocurrency.
Yep, it would have.
And then my favorite becomes, what's the other option? Whoever sent that at night, Barry, I owe you a drink for that. That's just a great response.
That's great. All right. Cheri, thank you. Some housekeeping because the team makes sure I say so. If you're not subscribing to the newsletter, please do. Nick from our team does a phenomenal job, as well as Claudia, on just curating things that are happening in the industry, some speaking events where we're going to be present, but just things that are popping up. There's a lot of press and publicity around just wire fraud in real estate, and we parse out the things that are important versus those that might just be noise. We will be sending a survey. The survey really does direct us to make sure that we're providing value during the time frame that we have together. So, Cheri, with that, I don't see any other questions or chat. I can't thank you enough. You're an awesome human being, but you're also a leader in the space. Nightberry speaks for itself. Tell Craig and the rest of the gang, we really appreciate the partnership. I'm going to send you that PDF and we'll get working on those other 3 bullet points. And for those customers that are still on, if you have other feedback, connect with our customer success teams. We want to hear from you. Any edge cases, there is an amount of information that's not important as we continue to iterate against what we're seeing as a growing threat. So, all right, awesome. Cheri, thank you. Have a wonderful day.
You too.